My daughter's been in a coma for 3 years. She just squeezed my hand in Morse code spelling, "Help me escape." I felt it at 2:34 a.m. on a Thursday night. 3 short squeezes, 3 long, 3 short. My hand was resting on my daughter Meera's as it had been for 1,000 nights before, but this time was different. This time her fingers moved, deliberately, purposefully. SOS. I jerked awake so hard I knocked over the water cup on her bedside table. Meera lay motionless as always, eyes closed, breathing tube, feeding tube, heart monitor beeping its steady rhythm. She looked exactly as she had for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, but her hand had moved. I was sure of it. I pressed the call button. A nurse arrived within 90 seconds. Young guy named Derek, who usually worked the night shift. I told him what happened. He gave me that look. The sympathetic one that said he'd heard this before from desperate family members seeing things that weren't there. "Mr. Castellano," he said gently. "Sometimes our minds play tricks when we're tired. Muscle spasms are common in coma patients. It doesn't mean conscious movement." I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat. 'Cause maybe he was right. Maybe I'd imagined it. I'd been sitting in this room every night for over 3 years, holding Meera's hand, talking to her, reading to her, playing her favorite music. Maybe my brain was finally cracking from the strain. Derek checked Meera's vitals. Everything normal. He adjusted her IV and told me to get some rest. I nodded, but didn't leave. Never left. My wife Claudia had stopped visiting 6 months ago. Said she couldn't bear seeing our daughter like this anymore. Said the doctors were right that Meera wasn't coming back, that the accident had destroyed too much of her brain, that keeping her on life support was prolonging everyone's suffering. We'd separated over it. She'd moved in with her sister. I stayed. Someone had to stay. Meera was 15 when it happened. Sophomore year of high school, straight A student, varsity soccer, first chair violin, beautiful and brilliant and full of life. Then one October afternoon she collapsed during practice, just dropped on the field. By the time the ambulance arrived, she wasn't breathing. They revived her, but the damage was done. Anoxic brain injury, oxygen deprivation. The neurologist said she'd likely never wake up. Said even if she did, she wouldn't be the same Meera. The girl we knew was gone. We should consider our options, meaning we should let her go. I refused. Claudia wanted to listen to the doctors. We fought for months. She said I was being selfish, that I was keeping Meera trapped in a body that didn't work because I couldn't accept reality. I said she was giving up on our daughter, that Meera was still in there, still fighting. The arguments got worse. Eventually Claudia left, said she'd grieve our daughter her own way. I could grieve mine. 3 years later I was still here, still believing, still hoping. I worked remotely now, software development. My company had been understanding at first, less so as time went on. I'd been demoted twice, didn't care. Nothing mattered except Meera. At 3:15 a.m., I felt it again. The squeezes, more deliberate this time. HELP, 4 letters in Morse code. I'd learned Morse code when Meera was 10. We'd used it as a game. Secret messages across the dinner table, signals during boring family events. She'd loved it, thought it was like being a spy. I stared at her hand, waited. Nothing else came. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my phone and started recording, positioned the camera to capture both our hands. Waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I felt stupid, desperate. Then at 3:27 a.m. it happened again. Clear. Unmistakable. M.E. The recording captured it. I could see her fingers moving, slight but real. I saved the video immediately, sent it to 3 different cloud backups. Then I sat there shaking, trying to decide what this meant. I showed the video to Derek when he came back for rounds. He watched it twice, frowned, said he'd get the attending physician. Dr. Sandra Okafor arrived 40 minutes later. She was Meera's primary neurologist, had been since the beginning. She watched the video 3 times, asked detailed questions about the timing and frequency, examined Meera thoroughly, checked her eyes, her reflexes, her brain activity monitor. Everything showed no change. Dr. Okafor looked at me with that careful expression doctors use when delivering bad news. "Mr. Castellano, what you've captured is interesting but not necessarily indicative of consciousness. Coma patients can have involuntary movements that appear purposeful. The brain can send random signals. The pattern you're interpreting as Morse code could be coincidental. I asked if it could be real, if Meera could actually be trying to communicate. Dr. Okafor hesitated, then said anything was possible, but extremely unlikely given Meera's brain scans. We could run additional tests, EEG, fMRI, see if there was any indication of conscious thought, but I should prepare myself for disappointment. The tests were scheduled for the following week. I spent that time recording everything. Every moment I sat with Meera, every potential movement. I felt the squeezes 4 more times over those days, each time spelling something. HELPMEESCAPE, help me escape. The words made my blood run cold. Escape from what? From the coma? From the hospital? From something else? I started paying attention to everything differently. The nurses, the doctors, the routines. Meera's room was in the long-term care wing, 4th floor, 8 patients total. all of them in vegetative states, all of them on life support. Families visited rarely. Most had given up hope. I was the only one who came every day, the only one who stayed overnight. The staff knew me, tolerated me. Sometimes I thought they pitied me, the father who couldn't let go. I noticed things I'd stopped seeing, how the night nurses always came in pairs to check on Meera, how they'd lock the door behind them, how they'd adjust her IV bag with movements that seemed practiced, rehearsed, how they'd whisper to each other, how they'd glance at the cameras in the corners, cameras I'd assumed were for security, cameras I'd never questioned. I started watching the other patients too, all of them young, all of them female, ages ranging from 13 to 22, all of them victims of different tragedies, car accidents, drownings, drug overdoses, all of them declared vegetative, all of them on indefinite life support, all of them with families who'd stopped visiting, except Meera. Meera still had me. I started to wonder if that was the problem, if my presence was interfering with something, if help me escape meant escape from people who were supposed to be helping her. The EEG was scheduled for Monday morning. On Sunday night, I stayed later than usual. The hospital was quiet. Most staff had gone home. Only night shift remained. Derek came in around 11 p.m. for rounds. He had another nurse with him, woman I'd seen before but didn't know well. They checked Meera's vitals, adjusted her medications. The woman watched me the whole time. When they left, I heard them talking in the hallway. Low voices. I caught fragments. Still here. Problem. Doctor needs to know. My instincts screamed. I grabbed my phone, opened the recording app, left it running in my jacket pocket. At 1 a.m., Dr. Okafor arrived. Unusual for her to be here this late. She came into the room, closed the door, asked if we could talk. Her tone was different. Professional but cold. She said the hospital administration was concerned about my constant presence, that I was interfering with staff routines, that I needed to establish better boundaries, start going home at night, let the professionals do their jobs. I asked why that mattered, why it was a problem for a father to stay with his daughter. Dr. Okafor's expression tightened. She said families who couldn't maintain emotional distance often made medical decisions based on hope rather than reality. That my insistence that Meera was conscious was a perfect example, that I was seeing patterns that didn't exist, creating narratives that gave me false hope. She strongly suggested I go home, get some rest, come back during normal visiting hours like other families. I refused, said I had every right to be here, that unless she could give me a medical reason to leave, I wasn't going anywhere. Dr. Okafor looked at me for a long moment, then said she'd review the situation with administration. She left. I sat there with my heart racing, pulled out my phone. The recording had captured everything. I backed it up immediately. Then I texted my brother Alex, told him to call me if he didn't hear from me by morning, told him where to find all my video backups, told him if anything happened to me, he needed to get the police involved. He called immediately, asked what was going on. I told him everything. The squeezes, the Morse code, the strange behavior from staff, the pressure to leave. Alex was a lawyer, corporate law, not criminal, but he understood how institutions worked. He said I needed to document everything, get everything in writing, start making noise if I felt threatened. He'd come up in the morning. We'd figure this out together. At 2 a.m., Meera squeezed my hand again. This time, the pattern was longer, more complex. D-A-N-G-E-R, then more letters. T-H-E-Y-K-N-O-W, danger. They know. They know what? That she was conscious? That she was communicating? Who were they? I looked up at the camera in the corner. The red light was on, recording. Had someone been watching? Had they seen the squeezes? Seen me recording? My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Leave now. You're putting her in danger. I stared at it. Typed back. Who is this? No response. I tried calling. Number was disconnected. I stood up, went to the door, looked out into the hallway. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. I went back to Meera, squeezed her hand, whispered that I wasn't leaving, that whatever was happening, we'd get through it together. Her fingers moved again. Weakly. R-U-N. Run. My daughter was telling me to run. I grabbed my jacket, my phone, started for the door. It opened before I reached it. Derek stepped in. He wasn't alone. 2 security guards with him. Large men. Mr. Castellano, Derek said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. We need you to come with us. There's been a concern raised about your behavior. Administration wants to speak with you. I asked what concern. What behavior? Derek said I'd been making recordings without consent, that I'd been harassing staff with accusations, that my mental state was concerning. None of that was true. I'd recorded my own daughter's hand movements. I hadn't accused anyone of anything. I said I wasn't going anywhere. Derek nodded to the security guards. They moved toward me. I backed up, pulled out my phone, started streaming to my cloud storage, announced loudly that I was being forcibly removed from my daughter's room without cause, that I wanted everything documented, that I'd be filing complaints. The guards hesitated. Derek's expression darkened. He said I could come willingly, or they'd call the police. I said call them. I'd love to explain to the police why the hospital was so desperate to separate me from my comatose daughter. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Derek pulled out his radio. Before he could speak, an alarm blared. Loud, piercing, emergency alert, code blue, room 412, Meera's room number. Everyone's attention snapped to Meera. Her heart monitor was going crazy. Irregular rhythm, blood pressure dropping. Derek rushed to her. The security guards called for medical team. Within seconds, the room filled with people. Nurses, doctors. Someone pulled me out into the hallway. I tried to see what was happening, but there were too many bodies. Too much chaos. Dr. Okafor appeared, barking orders. They were giving Meera something, injecting it into her IV. I screamed for them to stop, to tell me what was happening. Someone held me back. A security guard. Different from before. Older. He said quietly in my ear, "Stop fighting. You're making it worse. Let them stabilize her. Then we'll talk." I forced myself to go still, to watch, to wait. After 10 minutes, the chaos subsided. Dr. Okafor emerged. Her face was grave. She said Meera had experienced cardiac arrhythmia, common in long-term coma patients. They'd stabilized her, but she'd need intensive monitoring for the next 24 hours. I wouldn't be able to stay in the room. Too much equipment. Too much risk. I'd have to wait in the family lounge. I refused. Said I'd stay right outside her door. Dr. Okafor said that wasn't possible. Hospital policy? I asked since when. She said since now. The security guard's grip on my arm tightened. Dr. Okafor leaned in close. "Mr. Castellano," she said quietly, "you need to leave, for your daughter's safety. If you care about Meera at all, you'll go home and let us do our jobs." There was something in her voice. Not a threat, exactly, but close. I looked past her into the room. Saw nurses adjusting machines. Saw Meera lying still. Saw the IV bag being replaced with a new one. Something clicked in my mind. The cardiac episode hadn't been natural. They'd caused it, given her something to induce arrhythmia, created an emergency to justify removing me, to justify intensive monitoring, to justify doing whatever they were planning to do without witnesses. I stopped struggling, said I'd wait in the family lounge. Dr. Okafor looked relieved, nodded to the security guard. He released me. I walked to the lounge, sat down, pulled out my phone. The stream had captured everything, every word, every face, every moment. I had evidence. But evidence of what? I called Alex. It was 3 a.m., but he answered immediately. I told him what happened. He said he was coming now, told me not to leave the hospital, not to go back to Meera's room, just wait for him, stay visible, stay in public areas. He'd be there in 40 minutes. I sat in the lounge, watched nurses walk past, watched doctors having quiet conversations, watched the clock. At 3:45 a.m., a woman sat down next to me. She was maybe 50, dressed in street clothes, not hospital staff. She didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. Then she spoke quietly. "Your daughter is in a research program," she said. "One you didn't consent to. One the hospital doesn't advertise. They've been using coma patients for experimental treatments, testing drugs that haven't been approved. Your daughter has been conscious for 2 years. They've been keeping her in a medically induced coma while they study her brain's response to various compounds. She's been trying to communicate the whole time. They've been suppressing it." I turned to look at her. She held up a hand. "Don't react. Don't draw attention. I'm a nurse. I worked on this floor until last month. I quit when I realized what was happening. I've been trying to figure out how to expose it. You might be my chance." I asked why she was telling me. Why now? She said because Meera is scheduled for final phase testing tomorrow. Final phase means permanent. They're going to induce a deeper coma state to see if they can maintain cognitive function while eliminating all physical response. If it works, they'll have the perfect test subject, completely aware but completely paralyzed. If it doesn't work, she'll die. Either way, you'll never get her back. My hands were shaking. I asked how many patients. She said all 8 on this floor. All of them young women. All of them declared vegetative. All of them actually conscious and trapped. All of them being used as test subjects for pharmaceutical research worth billions. The hospital gets paid by the drug company. The families never know. Most families have given up, stopped visiting, signed DNR orders. The hospital just waits for them to die naturally. But Meera's different. You won't give up. You keep visiting. You keep watching. You're a liability. I asked what I should do. She handed me a flash drive. This has everything. Medical records, financial transactions, internal emails, communications with the pharmaceutical company, names of everyone involved. Take it to the FBI, not local police. The hospital has connections with local law enforcement. You need federal investigators. She stood up, looked at me directly for the first time. "Get your daughter out of here. Tonight. Before they can do the procedure. Take her somewhere safe. Then go public. It's the only way to protect her and the others." She walked away before I could ask more questions. Disappeared down the hallway. I sat there holding the flash drive, mind racing. How was I supposed to get Meera out? She was on life support. She needed equipment. She needed medical care. I couldn't just unplug her and carry her out. Alex arrived at 4:15 a.m. I showed him everything. The videos, the flash drive. Told him what the nurse said. He went pale, pulled out his laptop, started going through the files on the drive. 10 minutes later, he looked up. "This is real. These documents are real. Financial transfers from Pharmanova Corp. internal memos describing the research protocol, consent forms that were forged, patient records showing conscious brain activity that was hidden from families. This is massive. This is criminal. This could take down the entire hospital administration. Alex said we needed to move fast. He'd contact the FBI immediately. But first, we needed to secure Meera. He had a friend who was a private medical transport specialist, someone who could move critical patients safely, someone who asked few questions. Could we get Meera to the transport without hospital staff stopping us? I said I didn't know, but we had to try. Alex made calls. Within an hour, a plan was forming. The transport team would arrive at 6 a.m. We'd move during shift change. Maximum chaos. Minimum oversight. We'd take Meera to a private facility an hour away. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the hospital couldn't reach her. Alex's friend could arrange it. But we had to move now. Before the final phase testing. Before they could stop us. I agreed. We went to Meera's room. The intensive monitoring had been reduced. Only one nurse present. She looked up when we entered. Seemed surprised to see me. Said I wasn't supposed to be in here. Alex stepped forward. Introduced himself as Meera's attorney. Said we were exercising our legal right to transfer her to another facility. Had the paperwork to prove it. The nurse looked uncertain. Said she needed to get approval from Dr. Okafor. Alex said no approval was needed. This was a patient rights issue. We were within our legal authority. The nurse backed down. Said she'd page the doctor anyway, just to confirm. Alex nodded. Said that was fine. She left to make the call. I went to Meera, took her hand, felt for the squeezes. They came immediately. H-U-R-R-Y. Hurry. I whispered that we were getting her out, that she needed to hold on a little longer. Her fingers squeezed once. Acknowledgement. At 6 a.m., the transport team arrived. 2 paramedics with a specialized gurney. They moved efficiently, disconnected Meera from hospital equipment, connected her to portable systems, breathing support, heart monitor, IV, everything she needed to survive the transfer. Dr. Okafor arrived as they were loading her onto the gurney. She looked furious, demanded to know what was happening. Alex stepped in front of her, explained that we were transferring Meera to another facility, that we had legal right to do so, that any attempt to stop us would be considered unlawful detention. Dr. Okafor said Meera wasn't stable enough for transport, that moving her could kill her. Alex said we were willing to take that risk, that we'd signed liability waivers, that the hospital was released from any responsibility. Dr. Okafor looked at me. Mr. Castellano, please. You're making a terrible mistake. Your daughter needs specialized care. Care we can provide. Moving her now could undo years of progress. I said, what progress? She'd been in a coma for 3 years. What exactly had they been progressing toward? Dr. Okafor's expression hardened. She pulled out her phone, made a call, said something about security, about stopping a patient transfer. Alex grabbed my arm. Time to go. Now. We moved. The paramedics pushed the gurney toward the elevators. Dr. Okafor followed, arguing, threatening legal action. Other staff appeared, blocking our path. Security guards, the same ones from earlier. Alex held up his phone, said he was recording everything, said any physical interference would be assault, said he'd have their badges and the hospital's license. The guards hesitated. We pushed through, got to the elevators. One was already waiting. Doors open. We got Meera inside. Alex and I followed. The paramedics blocked the entrance. As the doors closed, I saw Dr. Okafor screaming into her phone. Saw security guards running toward the stairs. We had maybe 3 minutes before they reached the ground floor. The ambulance was waiting at the emergency entrance. We loaded Meera in 60 seconds. The paramedics worked fast, securing equipment, checking vitals, making sure everything was stable. Alex got in front with the driver. I stayed in back with Meera. As we pulled away, I saw hospital security pouring out of the building. Saw Dr. Okafor gesturing frantically. Saw someone taking photos of the ambulance. We drove. I held Meera's hand the entire time. Felt for squeezes. They came sporadically. THANKYOU, thank you. I told her she was safe now, that we'd gotten her out, that we'd expose what they did, that she'd get real help. The private facility was called Restoration Center. Small, discreet, specialized in treating patients who'd been victims of medical malpractice. The staff knew we were coming, had a room prepared, state-of-the-art equipment, real neurologists, people who cared about treating patients, not using them. We got Meera settled within 2 hours. Dr. Leslie Hammond took over her care immediately. She reviewed Meera's medical history, looked at the suppressed brain scans, examined the drugs Meera had been given. Her expression grew darker with each revelation. Dr. Hammond said Meera had been systematically drugged to suppress consciousness while maintaining basic brain function. The compounds used were experimental, designed to study conscious experience without physical manifestation. The research had immense implications for understanding consciousness, but using non-consenting patients was criminal, monstrous. She said it would take time to reverse the effects, to safely reduce the drugs, to allow Meera's natural consciousness to resurface. But it was possible. Meera could wake up, could recover. The damage might not be permanent. Alex had already contacted the FBI. Agent Victoria Reyes from the Medical Fraud Division was flying in. She'd review the evidence from the flash drive, interview us, start building a case. Alex said this would be massive. Federal charges, maybe RICO, the pharmaceutical company, the hospital, every doctor and administrator involved. They'd all go down. But we needed to be prepared. They'd fight back. They'd try to discredit us. They'd claim we kidnapped a patient, that we were delusional, that the evidence was fabricated. We needed to be ready. The FBI arrived the next morning. Agent Reyes was late 40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense attitude. She spent 6 hours reviewing everything. The flash drive, my videos, the medical records, Alex's documentation of the transfer. She asked detailed questions, took copious notes. When she finished, she sat back and said this was one of the worst cases of medical abuse she'd seen in 20 years. She said the evidence was substantial, but they'd need more. They'd need testimony from other nurses, other staff members who'd witnessed the program. They'd need to examine the other patients on the floor, confirm they were also conscious, being similarly abused. She said this investigation would take months, maybe years, but she was committed to seeing it through, to getting justice for Meera and the others. I asked what would happen to Meera in the meantime. Agent Reyes said she'd be safe here. The FBI would provide protection, make sure the hospital couldn't get to her, make sure she could recover in peace. Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Hammond slowly reduced Meera's medications. Each day, she became more responsive, more present. The squeezes became stronger, more frequent. She started moving other parts of her body, toes, fingers, small movements, but deliberate. On day 16, she opened her eyes, just for a few seconds, but she looked at me, really looked at me, recognized me, squeezed my hand. D-A-D, Dad. I broke down completely, sobbed like I hadn't sobbed since the day she collapsed. She was in there. She'd been in there the whole time, trapped, aware, unable to escape. The hospital had done that to her, had kept her prisoner in her own body, had used her for profit, had planned to go further, to trap her permanently. The rage I felt was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Dr. Hammond said Meera's recovery would be long. The drugs had affected her motor control, her speech, her cognitive processing. She'd need intensive rehabilitation, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. But she could recover. She could have a life. She could be herself again. The FBI's investigation moved fast once they had federal warrants. They raided the hospital, seized records, interviewed staff. The nurse who'd given me the flash drive came forward officially. Her name was Patricia Liu. She'd worked on the coma ward for 5 years before realizing what was happening. She testified about the research protocol, about how conscious patients were identified through brain scans but kept sedated, about how families were lied to, about how consent forms were forged. Her testimony was damning. Other nurses came forward too, people who'd been scared, who'd been threatened into silence, who'd watched patients suffer and felt powerless. Their testimony corroborated everything. The pharmaceutical company tried to distance themselves, claimed they'd been lied to by the hospital, that they'd believed all patients had proper consent, but internal emails proved otherwise, communications discussing how to hide the research, how to avoid regulatory oversight, how to maximize profit while minimizing risk. PharmaNova's CEO was arrested. So was the hospital's chief administrator. Dr. Okafor went into hiding. They found her 3 weeks later in Mexico. She was extradited, charged with multiple counts of assault, false imprisonment, medical fraud, and attempted murder. The other 7 patients from Meera's floor were moved to legitimate facilities. Their families were notified, told the truth. Some families were grateful, others were devastated, felt guilty for giving up, for stopping visits, for believing the doctors who said their loved ones were gone. 3 of the 7 patients woke up over the following months. 3 had sustained too much damage, remained in vegetative states. 1 died during the withdrawal process. Her body couldn't handle the stress of detoxing from years of experimental drugs. Her family sued, won a massive settlement, but it didn't bring her back. The trials took 18 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Okafor got 30 years. Hospital administrators got 15 to 20. PharmaNova executives got similar sentences. The hospital itself was shut down, medical licenses revoked, the facility was sold. The entire 4th floor was demolished. Meera testified at the trials. By then, she'd recovered enough to speak, haltingly at first, but her words were clear, devastating. She described being conscious but paralyzed, aware of everything around her, unable to move or speak or scream. She described the tests, the pain, the fear. She described learning Morse code as a child and remembering it in her prison, practicing squeezes until she could control them, waiting for someone to notice. She described the night she'd spelled, "Help me escape," to me, how she'd been so scared I wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe, would dismiss it like everyone else. She described the terror of the final phase testing approaching, knowing they planned to trap her permanently, knowing she might never escape. The courtroom was silent when she finished. The judge had tears in his eyes. 3 years after Meera squeezed my hand in Morse code, she graduated from physical therapy. She could walk again, talk normally, think clearly. The drugs had left some permanent damage, memory gaps, occasional tremors, difficulty with fine motor control. But she was alive. She was herself. She was free. We moved to a different state, wanted a fresh start, wanted to be away from the hospital, from the memories, from the media attention. Meera started college, studied neuroscience, said she wanted to understand what had happened to her, wanted to help other people trapped in similar situations, wanted to make sure no one else suffered what she suffered. Claudia came back into our lives slowly. She apologized, said she'd been wrong to give up, wrong to stop believing, wrong to leave. We forgave her, not because what she did was okay, but because holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. We needed to move forward, to rebuild, to be a family again. On the 5-year anniversary of Meera's rescue, we visited Patricia Liu, the nurse who'd blown the whistle, who'd given us the flash drive, who'd risked everything to help us. She'd lost her nursing license during the investigation, been blacklisted by the medical community. She worked as a medical consultant now, helping lawyers with malpractice cases. She said she didn't regret it, that saving those patients was worth any cost. Meera hugged her, said Patricia was a hero, that she'd saved 8 lives, that she'd exposed evil when others stayed silent. Patricia cried, said she just did what anyone should do, what everyone should do when they see injustice. Speak up, act, refuse to be complicit. We stayed in touch after that. Patricia became part of our extended family, someone who understood what we'd been through, who'd helped us survive it. Meera wrote a book about her experience, published it under a pseudonym. It became a bestseller, sparked conversations about medical ethics, about consent, about how easily institutions can abuse power, about how families need to advocate for loved ones, about how one person speaking up can change everything. The book helped other families, other people trapped in medical nightmares, other whistleblowers considering coming forward. Meera received letters from around the world, people thanking her, people sharing their stories, people finding hope in hers. She kept every letter, said they reminded her why telling the truth mattered, why surviving mattered, why fighting mattered. I still think about that night. 2:34 a.m., 3 short squeezes, 3 long, 3 short, SOS. The moment everything changed, the moment I chose to believe my daughter, to trust my instincts, to fight the system. If I'd listened to Dr. Okafor, if I'd gone home, if I'd accepted their explanations, Meera would have been trapped forever, or killed. The final phase testing would have proceeded. They'd have destroyed her completely. All because I stayed, all because I noticed, all because I believed in Morse code we'd learned when she was 10 years old, a game we'd played, a secret language. That language saved her life. I teach it to everyone now, my students, my friends, my family. I tell them you never know when communication will be the difference between life and death, between freedom and imprisonment, between hope and despair. Learn every way you can to speak, to listen, to understand, because sometimes 3 squeezes in the dark are all you get, and you have to be ready to hear them. 10 years after the hospital raid, Meera became Dr. Meera Castellano, neurologist, consciousness researcher, patient advocate, wife, mother of twins, who learned Morse code before they could write, and she kept a photo on her desk of her father asleep in a hospital chair, hand resting on hers, the man who stayed when everyone left, who believed when everyone doubted, who heard 3 squeezes and understood they meant everything. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.